Welcome to the Atlanta Music Critic Channel, where we explore the artistry and innovation shaping the world of music. Today, I'm excited to introduce a remarkable guest, Eric Jacobson. Eric is not just any conductor. He's a trailblazer known for his dynamic artistry and fresh approach to orchestral music. Recently appointed as the new music director of the Virginia Symphony, Eric brings a wealth of experience and a reputation for reimagining the concert experience. He's the co-founder and artistic director of the Knights, a boundary-pushing orchestra collective that has gained international acclaim for blending genres and creating deeply engaging performances. Eric is also the music director of the Orlando Philharmonic Orchestra, where he has revitalized the ensemble and brought new energy to its programming. Throughout his career, Eric has worked with legendary musicians like Yo-Yo Ma, Rene Fleming, and conducted renowned orchestras such as the New York Philharmonic and the Chicago Symphony. He's known for his ability to connect with audiences and musicians alike, making classical music feel fresh, exciting, and accessible. Today, we'll discuss his background, his musical journey, and his innovative approach to conducting. Please take a moment to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. This helps spread the word about our channel. Also, your comments motivate us. Please leave them below. So, without further ado, let's welcome our editor William Ford and Eric Jacobson to the channel.
How are you?
I'm so sorry I'm late. How are you?
You're 3 minutes late. That's unforgivable.
Unforbidden. It's over. How's everything?
Everything's good. How about you? Where are you located?
I'm in Orlando right now.
So you haven't had to contend with the snow like we get here in Atlanta.
No, I've heard you guys have gotten it. Yeah, I was up in the Berkshires in Massachusetts for the holidays, so we had a lot of snow, but that was on purpose. That was expected.
You from Massachusetts?
I'm actually from New York, but my wife is from Massachusetts, and we go up there for the holidays.
Where in the Berkshires?
We're in Richmond, which is it's a tiny little town just west of Lenox. We're 9 minutes from the Tanglewood Gates. Yeah.
I got my doctorate degree at University of Massachusetts in Amherst.
Of course. Yeah, it's a great school.
And it was so wonderful going to Tanglewood in the summer. It's one of those places where God really kissed the earth. It's so beautiful.
Is absolutely the truth. That is absolutely that is the best way to put it. It's so magical there, and we've always loved it there. My wife Aoife from Boston would come over to the Berkshires every time to time, and then we kind of just said, okay, let's try to make this happen, and have been so happy to be up there.
I'd like to begin talking a bit about you and some of the things that you've accomplished and what some of your plans are. But I usually like to begin at the beginning. You said that you were born in New York?
Yeah.
And your parents, were they musical?
Yeah, my dad is a violinist, played with the Met Opera for 30 years. My mom was a flutist, did a lot of freelancing in New York City and around, and taught a lot. Yeah, my brother, 4 years older than me, is an incredible violinist, and I played in a string quartet Brooklyn Rider with him for 10 years, and I still play with him in our orchestra, the Knights. And it's a musical world.
Did you ever get to a point when you were growing up and you said to yourself, yeah, I know they all like music, but maybe not for me?
Well, the thing is, I never really thought I was going to be a musician. At least, I mean, not in the world in which my brother thought he was going to be a musician. My brother at age 7 was practicing 2 hours a day and 3 hours a day pretty soon after he played a solo with the New York Philharmonic when he was 13 years old. And I was more bouncing off the walls, running around like a maniac. And it just didn't, and I always loved music. I always played it. It was kind of just part of my life. It was just part of the thing that we did. A really special moment was going to this camp. So in the Berkshires, this camp called Greenwood, which was a music camp. Probably about 40 kids come together. There are 2 versions of this camp. There's kiddie camp, which is ages 11, 12, 13, which is what I did. And then there's more or less a high school program. It was just 2 weeks of playing music together. And it was really where I realized that the people who loved music were the people I wanted to be around. It was not people that were necessarily going to become musicians. I didn't know any of this at that age, but it was people who were attracted and heard music in their life. And honestly, to some degree, it was like I had a crush on someone at age 11. I'm like, well, I better get good at the thing that we're all doing here so I could impress them. And that coinciding with my father saying, Eric, the better you get, the more fun you'll have. And how right he was. The deeper to this day, the deeper I get into something, the more fun I have, whether it's conducting a piece or just studying a piece. And that was kind of the direction. So it was a really intense transition in my life. I lost my mother around that age when I first went to that camp, and it was kind of like filling this musical void and this familial void. And that was when I started actually putting real time into music. Cello is my instrument.
Did you go to formal training, like college and conservatory?
Yeah, I did the whole thing. I went to pre-college at Juilliard, then college at Juilliard, and yeah, I did an undergrad there and had a great time. I had an amazing teacher and the colleagues. I mean, like that was just such a wonderful experience.
And was that on the cello primarily?
On cello. I studied with Harvey Shapiro, who was the cellist of the Primrose Quartet, named after the violist, which is rarely done. Oscar Shumsky was the first violinist, and Joe Gingold was the second violinist. The recordings that they have, which are few, are really some of the most amazing things in the NBC Symphony with Toscanini and a New York, freelancer as well. Really one of the great influences of my life. I have a few small things of his that I think about whenever I see them. I think about him, and really his. It was a very special relationship. I mean, he was a cello teacher. That's what he was for me. But pretty soon into our relationship, I was at his house every day for about 4 years, having a meal together, having a cigar together, having a drink together. He was blind. He was 90 and I was 18. And we found something. I mean, I found something very special in him. He was like a mentor, obviously, and a teacher, but also like wisdom and beauty and all the sacred and the profane all mixed into one.
The reason I wanted to talk with you is that I saw you conduct in Atlanta
Hmm.
with Yo-Yo Ma.
Yeah.
In fact, I was sitting on the stage. I never saw anyone conduct who looked like they were so joyful at it. And I couldn't figure out, is he joyful because it's the Atlanta Symphony? Is it because Yo-Yo Ma's there? Or is it because he just loves it in general? So I figured you could help clarify for them. Do you always conduct with such joy on your face? Do you know?
It's a good question. I do really, really love what I get to do. And there's no question that with an orchestra made up of some of the most incredible musicians I've ever met in my life, the Atlanta Symphony, I mean, talk about artistry and virtuosity and thought-provoking conversation and generosity and warm. I mean, I just felt so embraced by this group of people that come together and form this remarkable orchestra, the Atlanta Symphony. And I think that in itself is one thing to be joyful about. I think Dvorak Eighth Symphony and the Haydn C major cello concerto are joyous pieces, even in their maybe in Haydn's second movement, more thought-provoking than joyous, more introverted than extroverted, and in Dvorak's second movement that does have moments of shading and darkness at times, but really one that is an embracing piece, that these are joyous pieces. So maybe both of those things that you just said are part of that. And maybe the biggest thing that I've been feeling, I watching children play, we as adults often we don't play. Sometimes we have board game night, or you go and you do charades night, or during the holidays you get to do something with your family and friends, or however it is. But there is something about the fact that as musicians, what is it? We get to grow up, but we don't grow out of acting and playing. When we're on stage, when we're rehearsing, when we're thinking about music, we could still be children. And Yo-Yo, who for years has been a mentor and someone who has really helped form a lot of the musicianship that I hope to be able to embody, is a joyous man at play. He is someone who is playing and he's acting and he's in the moment, finding the colors that translate to his fellow colleagues on stage and the audience. And that's a great influence and a great example for all of us. So I think yes, Atlanta Symphony, and yes, the music, and yes, the fact that we get to be children and get to play. I think that's all the reason why it feels so good and special.
Do you conduct from a score? I don't recollect.
Well, I think the second half probably not. The Dvorak Symphony, I probably didn't have a score, but from the first half, yes.
When you're conducting with a score, what do you do with it?
Yeah, I think maybe the best way to describe this in a way that makes most sense is, that recipe that you make and you've made it 30 times and you do know it's half a teaspoon of baking powder and a full teaspoon of baking soda so that your waffles on Sunday can rise correctly, or that it's, three three tablespoons of butter with the chicken, or it, but you still reference that recipe because, oh, if I did this mistake, it would be better if I really got to check it. So I think a cello concerto like the Haydn, which I've played it in concert, and of course I studied it and so on. But there's something about you're with a soloist, you're with an orchestra, and you just want that recipe in front of you. There's a respect thing and all of those things. There are musicians, of course, and brilliant ones who the photographic memory becomes, oh, you could just turn the pages in your brain. And I don't have that, but I do feel like there is a freedom in internalizing a piece, particularly a symphony, meaning when it's just the orchestra together, not a soloist in an orchestra, because there's something about the team, and we're all one team. And with a soloist, we're all one team as well. But we're aiming to be with that soloist and how to connect with that. But when you're doing a symphony and you could be one group together, there's something very freeing about not being tethered in any. And certainly this is not something you get to do all the time. It's not something I expect as, oh, I have to do this, or if I don't do this, I'm failing, but sometimes it's possible because you've done a piece a number of times and you studied it and you own it so deeply.
I grew up watching Eugene Ormandy with the Philadelphia Orchestra. He never used a score.
I
Well,
mean,
never, 95% of the time didn't use a score, which was, of course, admirable. And he was another person who really enjoyed the music as he was conducting it.
no, I mean his legacy, I of course never got to see him live, but his legacy of recordings and his concept of colors, it was just absolutely incredible. His brother was a great cellist, Martin Ormandy, and I own a bow of his. Not a particularly great one, but I remember when that bow came to a shop and I immediately went back and listened to a bunch of Eugene Ormandy recordings thinking of this. And it really is true. He was absolute brilliant ear. Like I can't imagine what his rehearsals were like. And yeah, you had such luck to have gotten to grow up hearing him.
One of the things that he did very well in my memory, which of course could be clouded, but he knew how to play French music. He knew how to get a transparency in like Daphnis and Chloe that was remarkable, with a kind of lightness and energy, which sometimes a lot of conductors just don't seem to be able to get. It becomes a bit more leaden, a bit more Brahmsian thickness as opposed to French lightness.
Absolutely. Yeah, there is such transparency, particularly in the music that you're speaking of, that Ormandy was able to cultivate. And whether, obviously what an absolute brilliant orchestra that he had to the pleasure to work with, and how, the brass playing and the wind playing were such unique visions of how those instruments could be. Maybe in some ways, one of the greatest influences in American orchestral music, how both teachers, the sound world went on to influence so many others. But yeah, you're so right. Whatever it was, the type of colors he was going for, it was the type of colors where you could still see things through it. It wasn't, as you're saying, it wasn't just blue. It was blue, but there was something peeking through when he wanted it to. And then, of course, when the orchestra were to be as solid as we know that orchestra could be, you end up with something that is breathtaking because it hadn't been that way for the last 20 minutes. So you're spot on. I think that I agree.
When you're actually in the midst of conducting, what goes through your head, if anything? Do you bypass any cognitive processes? Is it just doing it and not giving any thought? I'm talking about in the performance, not in the rehearsal.
No, I think there's quite a bit of thought. I think you challenge yourself constantly to be listening, and listening is not passive. I mean, and by the way, I don't mind when someone listens passively to a performance, but I think in what we do on stage, it can't be passive listening. So I think one regenerates listening during a concert probably countless times, whatever that means. Are we figuring out right now the balance? Are we working on that thing? Where is the direction of where we are? And I think the beauty, of course, and what was so special about that concert in December was that I think everyone felt so free, whether that was the repertoire that we were playing, or playing to a joyous full house of music lovers, having audience members such as yourself behind the orchestra, making us feel like everyone was here and rooting for us, and wanting us to be great. When we're in that moment, the joy for spontaneity, the possibilities of doing something new and different that none of us had preconceived is there. Now, that's not meant to be like, oh, let's be different for the sake of it. But when you're heading down a path and you see the possibilities of taking just a small jog around something that you hadn't yet prepared, but it's possible, and you feel it, and you're like, everyone feels this thing, you could head in that direction for just a moment. And what does it take for a piece of music to be great? Well, it takes a couple moments of magic, or maybe just one moment of magic, and all of a sudden that piece that's 40 minutes long, that has that one moment of magic, great. So the composer did their job. And as a performer, what does it take, other than just playing a piece straight through, to be magical and to somehow give someone something that they can take away and bring home with them and own as themselves, as the person next to them owns differently, because no one actually can retain that other than a memory. So what does it take? Well, it takes really the active participation of everyone listening and being a part, so that that magic can happen here and there. I feel like in that performance, which I have not heard a recording back of, I really feel like there were moments that were magical, and I just, it was a real pleasure. Obviously, everyone was willing to be vulnerable, which is so dangerous and so wonderful.
You currently hold two music director positions.
Orlando, Virginia, and the orchestra that my brother and I started in New York called the Knights. Those are the orchestras that I have deep relationships with, and continue to build and continue to, what is it called, work towards growing as institutions of, either a civic orchestra like Orlando and Virginia, or like the Knights, which is more of a touring orchestra and a project-based group. And very lucky also to do guest conducting. So to come to Atlanta, or December was Atlanta, Utah, and Colorado, and getting to be with these brilliant orchestras and hear such different artists sound beautiful in different ways. I think I grow from those experiences. I hope that I could bring that to the groups that I have deep, long-term relationships with.
I know that the Virginia Symphony has about 75 employed musicians. I wasn't able to find out how many were at the Orlando Philharmonic, or is that like a per service orchestra?
Orlando's a per-service orchestra with a number of employed salaried musicians. Orlando is one of these incredible cities that is growing. It's one of the greatest growing cities in America. And you feel that in this city in terms of like growth. And I think this city will and will continue to grow in terms of what the orchestra's imprint in this community will be, meaning more performances, of course, that's very important, but also more tentacles into the community in terms of how we can give to a community, but how we can receive and figure out how to be part of Orlando in general. And I think, honestly, this is a goal for every group. I assume every group in the world, but Virginia, of course, is also constantly figuring out, as is the Knights, like how can we be more part of the community that we embody and we live in and so on. And I think so much of that has to do with thoughtful programming from an orchestral point of view, but also just thoughtful listening to both board members, staff members, orchestra musicians, and really community members and audience members.
When I was doing my background research, it looked like both orchestras ran a deficit in the last reported fiscal year. Do you get involved in fundraising in either of those two or both of them?
I think as a music director in the 21st century, and I assume so in the 20th, maybe in a different way, for better and for worse. I think that a music director's job is music and sustainability would be like the highest, the 60,000-foot view. And of course, music is the thing, right? So probably that supersedes anything. We must be communicative and great and joyous and bring our art forms so that people want to be a part of this thing. But I very strongly feel that a music director's job is fundraising and in time-wise certainly equal to music making. I feel like the time that I've spent in my life being on stage, rehearsing, studying, practicing, all those things, those are the tens of thousands of hours of music. And now to make that happen, to make it possible for all of the orchestra musicians to be together and to do the thing that we have been trained to do, it is about sustainability and the long-term growth, but also like just maintenance and fostering and cultivation of the people that will love what we do and will want to support it. So that's a long way around the statement that I think, when you apply for a position and you are working in a bank, know exactly this is in my scope of what I do, whether it's investing or teller or however it is. I feel like in the music world as a conductor, that line, information that you need to do is raise a bunch of money and really make great music. Not in that order. I mean, it just keeps coming back and forth. I have, musically speaking, I often want to do ideas that I find to be very exciting and fun. Like, we ended that concert that you saw with a piece by the great violinist, composer, arranger, Curtis Stewart. And it was a project that I was so excited about. A few years ago, I made a recording with Gil Shaham of the Dvorak and the Samuel Coleridge Taylor violin concertos. It'll come out in about a year. And on that program, we were just talking about Dvorak and his incredible Slavonic dances. And I was having a meal with Curtis Stewart, and it came up that he loved these Slavonic dances for various reasons, and he had thought about arranging. So getting him to arrange 5 of them to be a part of this album, like sort of the updated Dvorak. Dvorak, of course, was the first person to really own the concept that Americans should write American music. From an outsider's point of view, I mean, Ives was writing Ivesian music, but Dvorak was saying, you have so much stuff here in America, you don't have to be Brahms, and you don't have to be Mozart and Beethoven. And I think that freed Americans up, but it might have taken a century for Americans to find that sound in terms of like owning what it is. Copland, Ives, Bernstein, those were, forefathers in how we see American music. And that project was expensive. And to do that, I felt just like any other project that we as music directors or musicians want to do, got to figure out how to fund it. And, it's almost like, well, anything outside of this world, which hopefully inspires people to not only fund great projects, but hopefully that the things that inspire people to bring their friends and talk about what we do and go to bed and while their head's on the pillow saying, can't get that tune out of my head, or that was really beautiful, or whatever it was. I want to be a part of all of those things that theoretically will make what we do more sustainable.
When you're programming for all three organizations, Orlando, Virginia, and the Knights, do you keep an eye on what you're doing in one place in order to either duplicate it in another or not duplicate it in the
Well, every city and every orchestra is on a different trajectory of what is programmatically part of what is A, desired, B, needed, and C, possible, or whatever, however it is. You can't program the same pieces in the 28-29 season as the 29-30 season. Oh my gosh, those years are coming up so soon. So, every orchestra, you can't, maybe there are a few pieces that because of special celebrations, maybe you could do the Dvorak New World Symphony 2 years in a row, but you better not do it a couple of years later. But I think the goal when programming is really trying to find a way that an orchestra can connect with a community and find the right cross-section of music that is inspiring to the artists that are playing on stage, inspiring to the community, and really the fun things that are going to be enjoyable for all. Every orchestra has different commissioning schedules, things that you want to bring. Sometimes composers are so sought after and so needed that, well, we have to make sure that this thing is going to happen. And I'm looking at the reflection behind me here. I have for my 40th birthday, my family got me a letter that Richard Strauss wrote, and I thought it was perfect that I have a letter from Osvaldo Golijov that framed right next to it, because he is someone, Osvaldo Golijov, who is like, well, how can we make these big things happen? Well, it usually means 5-6 orchestras are all going to come together. So at times I could bring the musicians and the administrators from a few orchestras together and say, hey, can we do this all together? Because it takes that much energy to bring something to life. But generally speaking, different things work in different places. And of course, great music works everywhere. But besides for really the commissioning of things, generally speaking, seasons are totally different because you can't replicate what's needed in one place to another.
It did appear from the schedules that I looked at that Virginia does have a much more busy or complex season than is true in Orlando.
The only thing I'd say is that because the Orlando Philharmonic is often presented, you probably don't see everything that the Philharmonic's doing, and where Virginia Symphony has such a robust presenting schedule. So I think you're probably right that Virginia, because of the number of weeks that are performed, looks probably more like the orchestra that you live near in Atlanta in terms of scope of concerts presented and so on. And then in Orlando, we present a certain amount of concerts, and then there are a bunch of concerts that are also presented. So every orchestra sort of figures out their own way of being part of the season.
When you're doing programming for the Knights, do you have a particular goal in mind?
I think the difference, of course, is that New York has a really great orchestra. And so the Knights, I think when programming, we try to find what the conversation is and the things that will inspire. And I'll just give two examples. The first would be a few years ago, we have this project that is recorded. It's an album. It's called the Kreutzer Project. And of course, many people will know the Beethoven violin sonata called the Kreutzer Sonata. And this piece was written for violin and piano by Beethoven, but Beethoven wrote on the score stile molto concertante, in the style of a concerto, more or less. And we thought about that and this piece is so profound. And years later, 100 years later, Tolstoy writing his novella called the Kreutzer Sonata, based on the intensity and the romanticism and the pain and the pleasure and the lust that is created by a piece like the Beethoven Kreutzer Sonata. And Janacek, just a few years later, then wrote his string quartet called the Kreutzer Sonata. And we were thinking about these, and we then felt like we can make an entire project that spans 2 centuries. The Beethoven, we arranged it for orchestra. So it's a violin concerto for orchestra, which is such a spectacularly exciting piece. And with the orchestration, feels so wonderful. Then 100 years later, arranging the Janacek string quartet for chamber orchestra. And then 100 years later, in present day, both Anna Klein and my brother, Colin Jacobson, wrote pieces. So, and all of them are sort of arcing back to either Beethoven or the Tolstoy or the Janacek. So trying to find that kind of a project. And so that's one encapsulated programmatic idea. We're in the middle of what is called the Rhapsody project, taking Gershwin's Rhapsody and then commissioning 10 new pieces or so that are all of that similar vein of the edge effect of what is classical, what is jazz, or what is modern, what is new, and really loving and living on that edge. Well, listen, it's been a pleasure to speak, and looking forward to seeing you again. Thank you. Thank you for what you do. And
Hey, appreciate it.
yeah, have a good one.
You too. Bye-bye.
Thanks, William, for giving us such a fascinating glimpse into Eric Jacobson's world. His creativity and ability to bring innovative ideas to life truly shine through. What an inspiring journey to explore. And hey, we say it every time because it matters. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell. It's a small action on your part, but it makes a huge difference in helping others discover our content through the magic of the algorithm. Speaking of support, head over to patreon.com/Atlanta Music Critic and consider becoming a patron at any level. Every contribution directly fuels our ability to bring you high-quality content and grow this incredible community. A massive thank you to all of our current and former patrons. You are the backbone of our success, and your support has been transformative. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you again soon with more engaging stories and incredible music insights. Take care and keep the music alive.